elect a chair for this evening's meeting. So can I ask for any nominations for that activity tonight? Councillor Guy.
Yeah, thank you, Chief Executive. Under these rare circumstances, I'm more than happy to nominate Councillor Lisa O'Brien, who has chaired the meeting so successfully last year.
Thank you, Councillor Guy. Is there a seconder?
And I would be pleased to second that nomination.
Okay, all those in favour of that nomination, please. Thank you very much. That is very nice. Councillor O'Brien, would you like to take the chair?
Can I ask Joe to read the evacuation procedure, please?
If the continuous alarm sounds, you must evacuate the building and proceed to the assembly point. From this room, you follow the green running person signs to the exit, using either the marble staircase at the end of the building nearest to Bath Abbey or the main staircase. Please do not use the lifts. The assembly point for this building is in Orange Grove on the green outside grounds. There is an evacuation chair for use by disabled people who so wish in the corridor outside the Council Chamber Public Gallery. Alternatively, the area at the top of the marble staircase has been designated as a safe refuge where persons needing assistance should assemble.
Could you speak more into the microphone?
Yeah, sorry,
please?
okay. Will do. You don't want to repeat that, do you?
No. Don't think so. Everyone knows where to go.
All right, but I will, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Wright, would you like them repeated?
Okay.
Right.
Hang on. Bear with me, I'm just going to go and find the file again. Okay. If the continuous alarm sounds, you must evacuate the building and proceed to the assembly point. From this room, you follow the green running person signs to the exit, using either the marble staircase at the end of the building nearest to Bath Abbey or the main staircase. Please do not use the lifts. The assembly point for this building is in Orange Grove on the green outside Browns. There is an evacuation chair for use by disabled people who so wish in the corridor outside the Council Chamber Public Gallery. Alternatively, the area at the top of the marble staircase has been designated as a safe refuge where persons needing assistance should assemble. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, the next agenda item is to appoint a vice chair, and I would like to invite proposals from the floor, please. Councillor Guy.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you again for standing in at such short notice. Councillor Sarah Moore, I would like to nominate you for the position as Vice Chair. She's a new councillor, as many people are in the Chamber, but she's taken to the work of the Council like a duck to water, no doubt due to her background as a community activist, and of course the guidance from her very experienced fellow councillor, Councillor Ball. Before she was elected, Sarah campaigned for road safety, highway improvements, education and environment issues. She co-founded Twerton Whiteway Wombles Litter Pick Group, set up a community speed watch group and is also chair of the Twerton Residents Action Group. Since becoming a councillor, Sarah has taken on the role of member advocate for accessibility, which has given her excessive insight into on many council occasions and projects, and has a chance to highlight the needs of disabled people within our community, and she's done an outstanding job in that field. Sarah is a lifelong resident of Bath and has lived in Twerton and Whiteway for more than 20 years and has a husband and 2 lovely kids. Outside the council, Sarah works as a finance manager for a computer software company, and she also is a keen knitter and makes toys that are sold for raising money for local charities. So I'm now going to attempt to make some knitting jokes. I apologise, okay? So hopefully this will mean she will be a pearl of a vice chair, able to needle the chair when he's wool gathering and make sure the tension doesn't get too tight in the chamber. I know that was really bad. I apologise, everybody. Yeah, okay. Don't bother again on that one. Okay. I know Sarah will bring her customary attention and detail and very good humour to the role of Vice Chair, and I'm more than happy to nominate her for the position of Vice Chair. And I would also like to pay my respect and gratitude for Councillor June Player for being the Vice Chair and helping out for the few months that she did that. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder for that proposal, please? Councillor Player.
I'm more than happy to accept Councillor Moore's position as Vice Chair, and I hope you thoroughly enjoy it, and I'm sure that you will give Chairman Sean Councillor Moore as much support as he needs, and have a really good time.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations? No? Do you wish to sum up, Councillor Guy?
No, we'll have to move on, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We now move to the vote. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. Councillor Moore, congratulations. Would you like to come up and take your seat, please?
Oh, sorry. Chair, you might need to
I, Sarah Moore, having been elected to the office of Vice Chair of Bath and North East Somerset Council, declare that I take that office upon myself and will duly and faithfully fulfil the duties of it according to the best of my judgment and ability. I undertake to observe the code as to the conduct which is expected of members of Bath and North East Somerset Council.
Thank you.
Right, I am delighted to give you your change of office. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's for you to put it in. Okay, apologies for absence, please, Joe.
Yes, I've received apologies from the following councillors: Neil Butters, Chris Dando, Doug Deacon, Alan Hale, Lucy Hodge, Grant Johnson, Hal McPhee, Matt McCabe, Paul Myers, excuse me, Richard Samuel, Bruce Shern, Brian Simmons, Sean Stevenson McGaw, Alistair Singleton, Chris Watt and Dave Wood. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Have you been informed of any declarations of interest?
Yes, I have. I've had a declaration from Councillor Robin Moss as big local support the Radstock Foodies Club financially, and from Councillor Liz Hardman as a member of the Fair Food Alliance. Neither of them is a disclosable pecuniary interest, so that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other declarations? Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, ma'am. I would like to make a declaration that there is a saying in Hindi, "Akela chana bhar nahi phorta," which means one fan cannot dispel the fog, or a soul of food cannot change things. On my own, I cannot change and dispel the dark fogs of the current administration, and without taking much of your time, I am crossing the floor and joining the Conservative groups now.
Hi, thank you.
Thank you.
Right, thank you. Minutes of the 12th of May 2022. Can I have a proposer to confirm they're correct? Thank you, Councillor Jackson. I have a seconder. Councillor Walker, thank you. Those in favour? Thank you. Announcements from the Chair or the Chief Executive. I have no announcements except to say that any persons wearing jackets or ties may remove them if they so wish. Well, don't take off too much. Thank you. There's no urgent business from the Chair. Items from the public. David Redwell was registered to speak. Unfortunately, David is unwell, and Councillor Hardman has agreed to read his statement on his behalf.
Thank you, Chair. I will endeavour to do this in 3 minutes. On the journey to net zero, we still need funding for bus services in the West of England Mayoral Combined Transport Authority, which will require funding beyond October 2022. The Welsh Government is putting in £48 million into bus services in Wales. Bus services have now reached about 70 to 75% of pre-COVID-19 levels in Bath and Bristol City region, less than Somerset at 60 to 65% in rural Somerset and part of Baines. So with the West of England Mayor Combined Authority funding and subsidies from Bristol, Bath and South Gloucestershire for the support of services, which are 85 routes. The West of England Mayoral Combined Transport Authority and North Somerset Council are planning a service review of the network to start in October, but with most of the new network starting April 2022. I believe it started already. It's very important that the Journey to Net Zero Forum is part of the review. The Mayor and staff and operators should have 30 at that meeting to explain the proposal. The Policy Scrutiny or Climate Change Commission should invite the Mayor and the bus operator Stagecoach West, First Group plc West of England, HCT Group Fairsaver, WRAPT, Bath Bus Company Small Operator. This has successfully happened at South Gloucestershire Council Scrutiny Commission. But we still need to push the Department for Transport and Baroness Vere of Norbiton and Grant Shapps, Secretary of State for Transport, for bus and local coach funding with Western Gateway, Transport Board and South West Transport Board and the MPS. The following services are now proposed to be withdrawn by First Group in the West of England Mayoral Combined Transport Authority in Bath and North East Somerset, and there is great concern about this, as there will be to all of us. Following services are cut from October 2022. The 172 Bath Bus and Coach Station, the 173 Bath Spa Bus and Coach Station, the 178 Radstock Bus and the 171 Bath Spa Bus, the 11 to Bath, from Bath to Bathampton, the number 12 Bath to Haycombe Cemetery, the number 42 Odd Down Park and Ride to Bath Spa Bus and Coach Station. These services are withdrawn from October 2022. It is of great concern to many of us here. It may be possible to run the number 4 from Ogdown Park and Ride and the RUH route, or the RUH fund the Park and Ride link like Bristol and Western University Hospital Trust does, the 379 Bristol Bus and Coach Station and all the various stations involved. Due to driver shortage at Bath Western Island and Wells Bus Depot, and we are very aware of the shortage of bus drivers here in Baines. The fare box issue. Whilst we have a number of operators in the West of England Mayoral Combined Transport Authority and North Somerset area, it's very important that the tap-on, tap-off tickets include the Bath Rider, Western Supermare Rider, Bristol Rider, Avon Rider, Freedom Pass, bus and rail services, and new rider tickets for Thornbury, Yate and Chipping Sudbury and Clevedon and Portishead. We definitely need a driver recruitment campaign, we're all aware of that. And days out by bus and public transport campaign, free travel days like North Somerset for Greater Bristol Sundays, Baines and Mendip, South Gloucestershire and the Cotswolds. With buses operated by HCT Group, Fairsaver, WRAPT Bath Bus Company, Stagecoach, South West and First Group. We need urgent marketing campaign with First Group West of England, First Saver Buses, Stagecoach West, and First Group Great Western Railway.
Could I just ask you, have you got much more?
Is the red light on? I'll skip to the last paragraph, if I may, Chair. Thank you very much. I have tried to shorten it. We need to work with the Metro Mayor, Dan Norris, and his staff, plus North Somerset Council. We need to look at the railways, and we need to make progress on the Bristol Temple Meads to Westbury via Keynsham and other stations. And this needs to happen. It's cost North Somerset Council £11 million on phase 1 in subsidies, and obviously we need to be working towards these. Many thanks, Chair.
Well, thank you, Councillor Hardman, for that excellent presentation. No, really, I mean it. That was quite some effort. Can I suggest, group leaders, if you do have questions for Mr. Edgewell, that you state them, they can be minuted and sent to him for his response. Is that acceptable to everyone? Because I think it's unfair to put Ms. Hardman under the thing. Yes.
I just want to notify the Council that we are in the process of inviting Dan Norris to our Climate Emergency Sustainable meeting in September, so I just really want to put that on the record.
Thank you. Councillor Guy, do you have any factual questions?
I have no factual questions, but I see David on a regular basis, so I will ask him.
Thank you. Councillor Pritchard, do you have any factual questions?
David is highly respected for his transport knowledge, and he's presented us with a comprehensive list. My question is, why hasn't he included the True Valley?
Thank you. Councillor Walker? Thank you. Councillor Moss?
Yeah, thank you, David, for sticking for script. That's an unusual first. And quite appropriate this evening. Can I ask David if he's aware that the Labour Metro Mayor is considering franchising for a number of these services?
Okay, thank you. We will forward those questions to David and ask for a response when he's feeling better. Okay, we move now to agenda item 9, the Youth Justice Plan for 22-23. I call on Councillor Romero to move the recommendations. Councillor Romero, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the main objective of the youth justice system is to prevent offending by 10 to 17-year-olds. As you all know, the local authority has a statutory duty to produce an annual youth justice plan, which is then submitted to the National Board. This plan has been drawn together with input from the multi-agency team, including police, probation and health. The partners of the board have a shared responsibility, not only for the plan itself and the part that they play within it, but for resourcing the youth offending service. The council pays the most, with over 50% of the budget, which is about $425,000 towards a budget of $814,000. The submission of this plan triggers payment of a national grant towards youth offending work, and we've been told that this will be not less than what we have received previously. So the Youth Offending Service works with some of the most vulnerable children in our area, and we are committed to treating them as children despite their involvement in the youth justice system. We follow the national lead in having a child-first vision and are in the 4th year of actively taking into account childhood trauma and other poor childhood experiences. The rate of children coming into the system for the first time continues to fall, with 89 children out of 36.7 thousand children in Bath and North East Somerset in 2022, which is indeed fewer than in previous years, but there is concern that opportunities to intervene may have been missed and more children may well enter the formal justice system, either as children or as adults in the future as a result. Despite such low numbers, unlike many other places across the country, a greater proportion of those entering the youth justice system are from black and mixed heritage backgrounds. The Youth Offending Service is committed to working with Education, Inclusion and other partners to address the recommendations in the Avon and Somerset Criminal Justice Board's identifying disproportionality report of the experiences of people of colour. As an aside, I have met recently with the Black Families Education Support Group to ask for their insights from their work and the communities they work with. I am sure everyone in the Chamber will support the work ongoing and agree the work plan priorities, which are to strengthen participation, address disproportionality and extend effective practice models, tackle exploitation and support and equip staff. I am sure you will all be interested to note that performance will continue to be overseen by the Children and Adult Health Scrutiny Panel, and I think you will agree that the plan fulfills the requirements of the Crime and Disorder Act 1988 and so can be submitted to the Youth Justice Board for England and Wales, and we will adopt the plan as part of the Council's policy and budget framework. I would like to move the plan and at the same time thank all of those who have worked on this plan, in particular Mary Kearney-Knowles and Sally Churchyard and their teams. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Romero. Can I call on Councillor May to second this motion, please?
Chair, thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to second this motion to approve the plan. This is a report to be really proud of, and often in the past the plan has gone through without very much comment, and I think it's really important. There's two key elements as I see it in the plan, and the first one is stopping young people offending in the first place and then stopping them re-offending in the second place. So the key is really, and it really does show we've worked hard, the numbers have reduced significantly, and I think that's really important. But we've done that on our own. It's about working with the voluntary sector like DHI, Youth Connect, Mentoring Plus, etc., because they can get to the young people at an early stage and try to intervene to stop them becoming offenders. So it's really important that we do that. But we also work in partnership with the police, the probation service, education, of course, Oxford Mental Health Service, social workers and health. So I think from our point of view, these young people are incredibly vulnerable. They're often left and therefore the risks to them are so high. And the fact that we've been so effective, I think, is really, really important. I'm proud of the way that the Council has built up those relationships with young people, and that the staff will be more representative in the future. This, I think, is a really, really difficult time because of the pandemic, but I really support this, and I think it's a bit, talking about money, it's a bit like an auditor. If an auditor does his job well, you don't find any problems. And if you do this job well, you won't find any problems. So it's not about the money, it's about the quality of what we're providing, and I think it's something to be proud of as a council. Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Chair.
you, Councillor May. Do I have any speakers? Yes, Councillor Ball.
Say one microphone not working. I think it's very important that we ensure that, as much as possible, no young person enters the criminal justice system. I was only working with a 17-year-old last few days who was very much on the verge of entering that system. Slipped through the net by 4 agencies so far. I've managed to get back in one agency yesterday. They will now have work being carried out with them to ensure they're okay. So I think that's it, really, we're seeing people slipping through the net still. And it's very important we all, as councillors, when we recognise a problem in the area, that we actually clamp down quickly and make sure agencies are involved and encourage young people to actually engage. Some, through the pandemic, have completely slipped through the net. And they're not being picked up even by the police, etc. at the moment. But I think we all have a duty to our young people, those who come through the care system, those who haven't come anywhere near the care system, to make sure they are safe out in the community. Because even one person slipping through the net is one too many.
Thank you, Councillor Ball. Are there any other speakers? No, then we will go straight to the vote. All those in favour? Oh, I do beg your pardon. I'm sorry. I'm out of touch, aren't I? Do beg your pardon. Can I ask you to sum up, please?
Thank you. Yes, you'll be delighted to know I shall be incredibly brief. I'd just like to thank Councillor May for his comments and a reminder of the range of agencies that are involved. And also I'd like to thank Councillor Ball for his wise words too. And on that note, I'm very happy if we now move to the vote.
Thank you, and my apologies. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. We now move to agenda item 10, Baines Food Equity Action Plan 2022-2025. Councillor Romero, I ask you again, could I ask you to speak up just a little bit, please? Thank you.
Is that a bit better?
That's better. Thank you.
Okay. So the plan before you is one born of a growing need to ensure that the people in Bath and North East Somerset do not go hungry and that all have access to food with good nutritional value, not just something to fill you up or take the edge off. The need for such a plan is a shocking indictment of the society which we live in, where some have untold riches and others have the bare minimum to survive, and sometimes, more distressingly, not even that. Real wages and benefits will not increase at the same rate as inflation, so more households, especially those with lower incomes, will spend more on fuel and have less flexibility in what else they can purchase. We have all heard the many stories from families and from those on fixed incomes, such as pensioners, who are having to choose between heating and eating. And as the cost of living continues to bite, this appalling reality is only going to get worse and affect more households, in particular households with single parents and children and those with Black British, Black African and Caribbean heritage. Food insecurity is most acute for those households dependent on benefits. The number of people claiming universal credit in Bath and North East Somerset has increased by 61% over the last 2 years, from 7,435 in February 2020 to 11,982 in March of this year. The numbers of children on free school meals has continued to rise throughout the pandemic, currently an increase of over 17% from pre-pandemic rates. You will see in the report a long list of bodies and funding structures which have been brought together to help address this growing crisis. Despite all this good work, which underpins and joins up within the plan, I'm afraid I still find the report a depressing read, since we live in one of the wealthiest countries in the Western world and so should not need this sort of plan. Everyone should have enough food, and that food should be of a good nutritional standard. But failing that utopia, at least we have a plan, a good plan, for which I would like to commend both the original working group and the officers, including Cathy McMahon and Millie Carmichael. And this plan reflects both the strategic and operational ambitions of the Food Alliance and focuses priorities within 3 key themes: money, affordable food, and dignity and inclusion. I hope you will be able to support this plan.
Thank you, Councillor Romero. Can I call on Councillor Hardman to second the proposal, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'm very happy to second this motion on the Baines Food Equity Action Plan, especially as the cost of living crisis is deepening so much. The overall aim of this plan is to ensure that everyone living in Baines can reliably afford and access suitable food to meet their needs with dignity and without resource to emergency food aid. Progress has been made in tackling the problems of food insecurity in Baines, but research shows that a significant number of local residents are still having to make compromises on the quality of food they are eating, and around 4,000 could be experiencing food shortages. However, since the last report, which came to the Council in January 2021, significant progress has been made to improve food insecurity in our area. The Baines Fair Food Alliance drives the strategic direction and coordination to deliver the Fair Food Equity Action Plan. Strategic partnerships have been put in place with St John's Foundation, Feeding Britain and FareShare Southwest, amongst others. This has not only involved learning from best practice, but has secured over £200,000 of funding to support its work. A wide variety of projects have been set up to coordinate the activities of the various groups involved. Groups like the Affordable Food Network, for example, have progressed from the coordination of emergency food provision during the pandemic to expanding the type of food support available in the community, resulting in an additional 10 new affordable food projects now operating across Baines. And of course, there are many other groups involved in this plan. Looking at the priorities for the future, the Baines Food Equity Action Plan is not a sticking plaster. It tackles the root cause of food insecurity and offers solutions. The focus is on prevention and early identification of food insecurity. Through developing this Food Equity Action Plan, Baines Council, through the Baines Fair Food Alliance, is supporting residents through seeking to prevent, reduce and mitigate against the effects of experiencing household food insecurity and thereby taking preventative action to address health inequalities longer term. I am not as depressed as Councillor Romero. I think we are making progress. I think this action plan is excellent, and I think we're well on the way to making food insecurity less of a major problem in our area, so I urge you to support it. I also would like to thank Cathy Mahan and Millie Carmichael and the other groups involved for their fantastic work that they're doing to achieve this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hardman. We have Councillor Moss who wishes to speak.
Yes, thank you. I'd too like to thank the officers and the working group for the preparation of this report. I would say that, of course, there is a problem with the report, in as soon as you put the pen down or the keyboard down, it becomes out of date. And very clearly, as we get more reports on inflation, we know what the numbers are like. We know that 65% increase in fuel costs is likely in a couple of months' time. And there is the wider issue as well that the donations at supermarkets are going on to food banks and to foodies clubs are starting to dry up. So we know there is more work to be done. We know there are problems. And I'd just like to emphasise a couple of points which are important to point out. My experience is with big local declaration that I made is we are now supporting, along with Radstock Town Council, the Foodies Club, which is boxes of food every week to families on low income in Radstock and Westfield. And the evidence is very much that while some people are on benefits, there are an increasing number of people who are working. And it's low pay, it's insecure hours with 0 hours contracts, and it's very clear that this is wider than just, I suppose, people who you traditionally see on low income because they're on benefits. It's actually people who are working. And as well as that, we are getting reports that while food is being provided, there are people who are increasingly worried about actually being able to afford the fuel to actually cook the food. And for example, we're looking at a funding scheme in Radstock Westfield to provide people with slow cookers, just simply because that becomes a cheaper way of providing food. I know there's been as I say, really welcome this report, more than happy to support it. I would probably less optimistic than Liz. I think that the report like this is going to be coming back to this council on a more regular basis, as unfortunately things are going to get worse before they get better. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ball. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? No, go back to Councillor Romero.
Thank you very much, and thank you to my Labour colleagues who, I think have summed up the situation very well. My comments were absolutely not around denigrating the report at all in any way, or those that have worked so hard on it, but it's about the circumstances that we, are in, which has led to the need for such action. And I'd also actually like to thank both Councillor Moss and Councillor Hardman for the work that they do in their communities in addressing this too.
Thank you. We will now move to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. I now call on Councillor Warren to move the PDS annual report. Councillor Warrington. Sorry, Warrington. Warrington. Just making sure that Councillor Warren is awake. Would you like to do this?
Thank you very much, Chair. I would like to recommend this report to members. My first point is scrutiny is a really important part of the Council's processes. It's a check and balance on important decisions made by the administration of the day. We owe it to our residents to scrutinise the issues that come to our panels, and they provide a very extremely important function. And I'd like to remind members that we also had some LGA training, which a number of both members and officers attended, and I can honestly say that was a very good training session, and I would imagine that nearly all of us came away with some learning from that. I'd like to also remind you that scrutiny panels are part of best practice. They should be seen as a critical friend to the council and to help the council with their processes. You'll see from the report that there have been diverse issues discussed and scrutinised between those three panels. And we've also had a number of call-ins. And not to mention that also the panels have continued to operate during lockdown periods as well during the past 12 months. The members work incredibly hard for our panels. They ask incisive questions, and there's been a lot of tenacity in getting to the bottom and getting to answers. So I'd like to thank all the chairs, the vice chairs, and the panel members for their attendance and their commitment to the scrutiny panel over the last 12 months. It's worth also mentioning that there are an awful lot of reports to read and very long meetings, although not quite as long as the 500 and plus pieces of paper that we have for this particular council meeting. I'd also like to thank the Cabinet members for attending the meetings and briefing the panels and staying usually for the whole of the meetings. And finally, I would like to offer all our thanks from the panel members to the officers who've supported all the panels with their expertise, guiding us through all the processes, and for patiently answering all our questions. So with that, Chair, I would like to move the recommendation as printed under 2.1. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Warrington. Councillor Walker, would you like to second?
Yes, please, Madam Chair. I'd like to second the recommendation 2.1 to note the work of the PDS panels as set out in the annual report, Appendix 1. The annual report provides an opportunity to highlight some of the positive work carried out by the panels and committee, both internally and externally, and particularly with partners and agencies involved in scrutiny throughout the year. In the report, you will see a snapshot of works that each of the panels have been involved in. The panels are here to be a critical friend, as Councillor Warrington has said, to Cabinet members and make recommendations. And I would also like to put my thanks to Donna Verco, who has supported scrutiny in the last 3 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Are there any speakers? Councillor Jackson.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. I would like to commend this report. I think an excellent job has been done both by the officers, by the Cabinet members who have been answerable to the PDS panels, and by the councillors and people from outside bodies who are sometimes forgotten, such as the representative of the Teachers Trade Union, who has faithfully attended the Children and Young People's panel for more than a decade, I think. So it's not just a question of paid of the officers who are doing an admirable job, but also of volunteers, and I think we would probably like to recognise that. I don't like to sound like some worn-out Labour grandee, but days were when we had more resources behind this important job, which has been rightly underlined. We had more officers, and we had councillors with the time and the ability to do much more on the field of policy development. I could name, for instance, the work that was done on boat dwellers and on the homeless, and we did 2 substantial reports, which I'm sure Councillor Pritchard will remember, on adult social care from the Health Scrutiny Panel. However, I think we should also remember, because we've had a very striking example of it with the case of the Virgin Care renewal contract, the importance of the committees in getting a further consideration of what might be a very unwise decision. In this, I would point to the overturning of the decision to close down the gynecological cancer unit at the RUH. This was my first experience of scrutiny, and the scrutiny panel got the decision reversed. Similarly, the closure of the mortuary, this is a rather grim subject, at the RUH. The scrutiny panel got that reversed relatively recently. So I think we should all support this, but also say we want more resources, more investigation, and a greater breadth and depth to the reports.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Councillor Hurst.
Thank you, Chair. I want to also commend the report. I think it's a good reflection of the work that we've done, certainly on my scrutiny panel that I sit on, and I think it demonstrates the focus on kind of some of the key policy areas that have been progressed forward on the Council. I too would support the comments that Councillor Jackson made around that we need to be having the time and the effort to also be focusing on policy development as well as scrutiny, that the power of kind of using councillors and members to help develop and make better policies, I think, is underutilised at the moment, and I totally recognise that officers are stretched in being able to kind of be able to facilitate that, but I think we need to do that, and we need to encourage more of that. I think while I think the report recognises the good work that councillors do, we shouldn't rest on our laurels. That I think robust scrutiny and policy development is really important for good democracy in this council, and that we have to keep striving to do better, to learn from best practice from the other panels, and kind of make sure that we're really striving to have the highest level of scrutiny and policy development in this council. But I commend the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hurst. Is there anyone else? Councillor Kumar and then Councillor Pritchard. Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Chair. Effective scrutiny helps secure the efficient delivery of public services and drives improvements within the authority itself. Conversely, poor scrutiny, I repeat, poor scrutiny can be indicative of wider governance, leadership, and failure of services by the leadership. It is vital that the councils and combined authorities know the purpose of scrutiny, what this effective scrutiny looks like, how to conduct it, and the benefit it can bring. These are not mine words, by the way. These are the words of the former Minister for Local Government, who might be, maybe, become the next Prime Minister of the country, Rishi Sunak. The Ministry of Local Government also rightly says in its report that creating a strong organizational culture supports scrutiny work that can add real value. For example, improving policy making and the efficient delivery of public services. On the contrary, low levels of support and engagement with the scrutiny function often leads to poor quality and ill-focused work that serves to reinforce the perception that it is of little worth or relevance. So I congratulate, obviously I have been a member of one scrutiny panel, and I take this opportunity that all the PDS panels and the scrutiny panels and the officers, they have done wonderful work. I have a reservation for one panel or PDS, but I won't narrate that today. I'll write properly later. So thank you to the officers, and thank you to everybody who has been working on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kumar. Councillor Pritchard.
Yes, I just wanted to expand a little bit on the comments made by Councillor Jackson. And she says that basically scrutiny is underfunded. And it's all too long been the fact that scrutiny has been the poor relation in the democratic process. It's always been to see how many scrutiny panels can you reduce. And we're now down to 3. And that we've had to combine children's and adults into one panel. And it's evident, and from those panel members, and would I say cross-party, the members of that panel are absolutely excellent in the way they address the challenges that before them, and which are significant. But by bringing it to one panel covering both aspects, what we've done now, volunteered as a panel to do, is to dedicate one meeting to children and one meeting to adults, alternating it. But the pressures now, and of course it's all apparent now, the pressures in front of us. We've got the end of the CCG with the ICB, the Integrated Care Board, started from the 1st of July. Historically, we took on the first time that the NHS had been scrutinised. That was taken on by the Adult Scrutiny Panel. It wasn't a comfortable relationship initially, so much so that that scrutiny panel has a licence to refer directly to Secretary of State without going through council, and on one occasion over considerations of the closure of the Min Hospital, we were obliged to do that. And that brought a discipline in that we were respected by the NHS. Now, with the inception of the ICB, the Integrated Care Board, there is a deficit in representation to our panel now, and I hope that that doesn't mature into any permanent view. But we've also got the closure of the HCRG contract, which was made by this administration against immediate advice of the officers, and we're going to have to scrutinise that heavily going forward. What I'm trying to say is you've got a valuable report here, but we've got to make sure that the strength of scrutiny doesn't diminish, and also policy development is enhanced. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pritchard. Are there any other councillors wishing to speak? Councillor Hedges. Thank you, Councillor Hedges.
Chair, as Stephen mentioned, I'm an employee at HCRG, so although I wasn't going to say it because there was no vote and no discussion.
Thank you, Councillor Curry. Councillor Jackson.
Chair, I wonder if something could be done about the light system, because from where I'm sitting, I cannot see the lights. I don't know if it's the same, but unless Councillor Warren needs to try forward.
Now, I think it's more prominent now. Okay? Right, if there are no other speakers, I come back to Councillor Warrington. Yes, got the name now, to sum up. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. I quite like my name, so I'm going to keep it. Yes, I agree with everything that many of the members have pointed out. I do hope that we can go from strength to strength, and that accepting this report and noting it and working as hard as we possibly can within our panels, we'll be able to enhance the scrutiny function that we're currently providing. So I recommend this report to the members. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Warrington. Right, we move to the vote. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. Right, we move now on to agenda item 12, the Constitution refresh. And I call on Councillor Moss to move the recommendation, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. First of all, I've been chairing the Constitution Working Group in the absence of Councillor Samuel, and I'm sure that we all wish Richard a speedy recovery in what sounds difficult times. We, of course, discussed this last month, so this is a refresh. I'm not going to repeat all the issues that were brought up at the last council meeting, but I need to emphasise that point 3.1.1 7.23, which is the petitions and statements from councillors and the public. And clearly this is the major change from the last council meeting, where it is now worded that where possible, members of the public and councillors are strongly encouraged to submit the text of their statement in advance to enable members to read it before the meeting. And I think the first bit is important to be emphasising to people. You'll get more bangs for your buck, you'll get more benefit if you submit in writing so it can be read, but it takes away the compulsory element of having to provide that in writing. And it's right that that should be the case, and I think it's good that the administration has actually listened to public voices on that. And I would like to thank those members of the public in Baines who have contributed to the petition, who have sent the emails and have made their voices heard, saying that this was not a change that they found acceptable. And I will repeat the point that I made at the last council meeting. It's important for us to make sure that members of the public can come and speak to us, and that they do come and speak to us. And I think the wording now actually encourages that in a way that actually a compulsory written statement actually acted as a barrier. So I'm more than happy to move this change, and I hope the whole chamber supports it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moss. Before I call Councillor Ball to second it, could I just ask for clarification from you, Michael, in that we earlier ratified last council minutes. So does this document now contravene the 6-month rule?
No, Chair, because within the 6-month rule there is provision for officers to bring back a report to council within 6 months. And that's effectively what's happened today. We're bringing back a recommendation for the whole constitution, and previously it was a review of just part. But because officers are doing that, then the 6-month rule is not breached.
Lovely. Thank you very much for clarifying that. Right, moving to Councillor Ball to second, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very happy to second these recommendations from the Cross-Party Constitution Working Group. I'm grateful to my colleagues on the working group for engagement over many months of intensive work, both councillors and officers, and to Robin for taking over the chair following Councillor Samuel's ill health. And I echo his words, we all wish Richard a swift recovery. I'm very pleased the working group reached unanimous agreement on its recommendations. This updated constitution will help us modernise the way we work, be more accessible, clearer and more streamlined, fit for the future. It'll be more compatible with the digital devices we all use every day, and be more understandable with a glossary to help those who don't know all the local government jargon. I'm very glad we have found a compromise to safeguard everyone's right to speak at public meetings. At the last week of council, Councillors Guy and Samuel undertook to work with officers and the Constitution Working Group to make sure the arrangements would not reduce anyone's access. I'm glad the working group was able to find a way to put this into practice. Now we will continue to request and encourage all speakers to provide the statements in writing. Most people do this anyway, and all the good reasons why it's a good idea are still valid. But the rules will clarify that it's not a condition of speaking. I'm also pleased the guidance sent to speakers is being updated with more practical support on offer, and a particular emphasis on the needs of disabled people. I must say I've been disturbed by the nature of debate on this issue at times, particularly online, but also for some councillors tried to make a political football out of a practical issue. However, now the working group has found a solution, which I hope the whole council will support. Let me be clear, this Liberal Democrat administration is running a listening council. The refresh is all part of our approach. Over the last 3 years, we've opened up democracy and debate more than ever before, and will continue to do more to ensure all residents have the chance to hear and be heard. We improved webcasting and meetings being published on YouTube. We brought in new online webinars and consultations. We're pioneering co-design and citizen jury processes. We increased the number of written questions resident table. And our councillors talk to hundreds of residents each week, knocking on doors and holding drop-in sessions. And these are just some examples. Chair, I believe we are fortunate to live in a vibrant and free democracy where politicians are open to feedback and challenge. So many people around the world do not have freedom of speech and risk arrest, imprisonment, torture or death if they speak out against the government or regime which rules over them. I think we should consider our debates in this perspective. I so second.
Thank you, Councillor Ball. Right, we open the floor to debate. Councillor Wright.
The process to refresh this constitution did not involve the Green Party. At no point was I, the sole Green Party councillor, included in the conversations or the work of the Constitution Working Group. This working group, which I believe has met regularly to decide how the council operates, is made up of the Liberal Democrats, Conservatives, Labours and the Independents. I am the only councillor not invited to take part, and this is discrimination. It states in the Baines Equality Policy Commitment that Bath and North East Somerset Council is committed to equality of opportunity for the whole community and believes that the diversity of the community is a major strength which contributes to the social and economic prosperity of the area. The Council commits to working within the Equality Act of 2010 to ensure that no resident of or visitor to the area, job applicant, employee or other person associated with the Council is treated inequitably or unlawfully or unjustifiably discriminated against. I would argue that by not including the only Green to the Constitution Working Group, the Council, under its own policy, has acted in a discriminatory way. I also point out that many residents in Baines have voted Green and they have been discriminated against. Over the many months that this group met, I was not consulted or spoken to of the decisions it was taking. It was not until the 13th of June 2022 that the monitoring officer sent through the draft constitution for me to see, and only from that point were my emails responded to. Over several months, I have been working with aggrieved residents with regard to the changes this Lib Dem group wanted to make to the Constitution on the way speeches and statements were made to be delivered at meetings across the Council. An open letter was sent to Will Godfrey calling on the Council to recognise the impact that these changes would have on residents. Over 400 residents signed this letter, and because of their action, this Lib Dem administration has done a U-turn. A small victory for the freedom of speech for everyone in Baines. However, the Constitution refresh has also changed how many questions a councillor can now ask at Cabinet or full Council, from unlimited to 3. This seems to be a deliberate attempt to stop smaller parties holding the larger parties to account, since there are presently 35 Liberal Democrats, so they could easily ask 3 questions each, giving a grand total of 105 questions for the ruling party. However, one sole councillor from an opposition party can only ask 3 questions, not enough to keep the administration accountable or be able to properly represent constituents. The Liberal Democrats' manifesto at the last local elections expressed the concern they had about the lack of transparency and openness of the Council. Many will argue that too many questions waste precious officer time, but questions are how opposition councillors keep the administration accountable and transparent. Indeed, the refreshed Constitution 4412 states councillors are able to hold the local authority and fellow councillors to account and are able to constructively challenge and express concern about decisions.
Okay, can you draw your remarks to a close?
To guard against power worship and subservience, questions are a form of scrutiny, and this is the job of an elected councillor. It would seem that those who have now a power are more concerned with keeping it.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Pritchard.
Yes, Council. The last time we met, members on the opposition benches, indeed everybody in this chamber, bar the Liberal Democrats, pleaded with the administration not to progress with a policy that would have been seen members of the public banned from speaking if they failed to submit the full text of their speech beforehand. Members of the administration were told that one Bath resident had already been barred from speaking because he was delivering humanitarian aid to the victims of war in Ukraine, and as a result had not been able to write his speech before the deadline. They were told by one esteemed councillor in particular that their actions were akin to the murder of democracy. Well, after having had time to reflect, it seems democracy in Baines has witnessed a Lazarene resurrection. I would like to thank the administration for coming to its senses and including in this constitutional refresh a form of wording that should no longer see members of the public excluded from the democratic process. It now comes down to a matter of trust. I trust that the administration will not again choose to interpret the phrase subject matter to mean the full text of the speech, and I trust that members opposite will no longer decide to bar someone from speaking if their pre-speech submission is merely a short sentence that gives a simple indication of what they wish to say. Looking at the administration's record over the past few years, some might say my trust is foolishly misplaced. I sincerely hope this is not the case. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pritchard. Councillor May.
Chair, thank you. I just wish to raise one specific query. I think it's great credit to this council, the fact that people can work together and come up with this document. A lot of controversy along the way, but I think the fact that we can work together is great credit to this council generally. I wanted to just raise one query around item 6.1. I'm going to support this, so I appreciate we're not going to change it halfway through the meeting. But the reference to the health and well-being strategy not now being required to bring to council, with the changes that are taking place with the Integrated Care Board, I do think it's something that we actually should be discussing at council level rather than at a scrutiny or at the cabinet meeting. So I would like perhaps to think about that in moving forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor May. Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Chair. Just 2 months ago, I called it murder of democracy, and I was laughed at. People told from the opposition benches that, and the councillors, that this is an awful lot of hyperbole. Others says it is an enabler of not less but better democracy. How laughable it was. The third says people are getting a bit confused. People are getting a bit confused. Now, who was confused? How you had a U-turn today? Is it not laughable now? The fourth one says, I do think a little bit of politics is being played here. A little bit of politics. As Indian would say, a little bit of politics. Is not that politics? First spitting and then licking it back. That is what politics you are playing. Fifth one says, it was perfectly reasonable. I mean, I just don't know. If you want to read, you read. If you don't want to read, you don't read. I don't like to read. Fair enough. Councillor Wright very rightly says that it was against Equality Act of 2010, and I had written to the Ombudsman and people had written against it. It is good. It's very good that you have come to the senses, because you said, the leader of the council says, individuals are trying to score political points. What happened to the political point now? What happened? So, it was discriminatory. I had written at least 10 emails to the monitoring officer and the CUA and copied sometimes to others. And I'm also very glad, and I entirely agree with Councillor Wright's question, that why only 3 questions? Why not? We are elected, we need to ask questions on behalf of the residents. Lib Dems have 35, 30, it was 37, thank God, 2 less. So at least 6 questions we have got now to ask, but they can ask hundreds of questions, 35 into 3, more than 100. We cannot ask. Why not? Because 3 questions into 3, 11 or so. If you have to speak, you will have your time, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kumar. Councillor Warrington, please.
Thank you, Chair. Council, I wish to speak at Council, Cabinet or any other public meeting, including scrutiny. I've been coming to this council since 2012, long before I was an elected member, and this has always been the case, so this issue is not a refresh. At the last council meeting, the administration was reminded of the folly of such a proposal by our Conservative group, the Labour group, the council's Green Party member and the independent councillors too. Everybody, that is, except the Liberal Democrats, whose backbenchers were...
I'll let it go once, but that's not correct. In that debate, there were members of the independent group that voted for the constitutional change. So that statement is an incorrect statement. So
I'm happy to change that, Chair. Some independent councillors, if that's agreeable now. Some independent councillors. And were like the army of the Grand Old Duke of York. They were marched up to the top of the hill before being marched back again. Happily, though, subject matter seems once again to mean exactly what it should and has done before. With this issue, a pattern can be detected, a pattern that's been repeated consistently since this administration took control of the council just over 3 years ago. And it goes like this. A bad, ill-thought-out policy is announced. Opposition councillors, members of the public, point out its obvious flaws. Chair, just a point of order. A number of people have been speaking, and some people keep speaking over them and whispering. And I'd ask them to not do that when people are speaking. It's good point. And I've missed some other speeches as well. So I'd ask you to please refrain from doing that when people are actually speaking. This administration then reverses course and pretends it never intended to do the thing it set out to do in the first place. We've seen this with the proposed tip tax to charge people to recycle certain materials, with attempts to introduce car parking charges in Midsummer Norton, with the original plans for the Ring of Steel, which the current leader of the council recently described as appalling, and with the proposal to develop the Toofer Field. Although, to be fair to the administration, they've now U-turned on the U-turn and have ended up back where they started. And now this. The moral of the story is simple. Listen, when we criticise your policies, we're not playing political games, but genuinely trying to ensure residents are not negatively affected by poor decision-making. In future, the Grand Old Duke of York should be minded to keep his troops at the bottom of the hill to save them the indignity of being marched down so soon after reaching the summit. Thank you, Chair. I was over the 3 minutes because I made a point.
Thank you, Councillor Warrington. Councillor Clark, please. Sorry? Councillor Clark, please.
Council, I welcome the changes the cross-party working group has made to the Constitution, in particular the instruction that councillors and members of the public are merely encouraged where possible to submit the full text of their speech to democratic services beforehand. This clearly suggests that it is not possible to do so. For example, as we have heard earlier, that if someone travels to a war zone to administer humanitarian aid, you will not be barred from speaking. How regrettable it is that this even needed to be spelled out. The proposed wording for this aspect of the Constitution is exactly what we and some of the other parties in this chamber asked for in the first place. It's a pity it took so much time at the last council meeting, as well as a petition signed by hundreds of residents, for the administration to see sense and present council with a more agreeable alternative. This is yet another example of this administration's tendency to proceed with a poorly thought out policy before quietly reversing course when its flaws are pointed out. The Cleveland Bridge works are still not finished. The Clean Air Zone is still not fully compliant. Promises the Liberal Democrats made in their 2019 election manifesto to be a listening council, to tackle congestion, to make the council more transparent, to clean up the city, have hardly even got off the ground. I urge the administration to be more focused on achieving these things instead of pursuing unnecessary policies that just end up wasting council's time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Hughes, please.
Thank you. As a member of the Constitution Review Committee, I would just like to add my thanks to both Joe Morrison and Michael Hewitt for the huge amount of hard work they've done on this. They've clearly achieved the objectives set out in the report, and they should be proud of the results.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Councillor Jackson, please.
I don't know if it's the water in the Soma Valley, but Councillor Hughes has just managed to say what I was going to say. Basically, I think that a monumental task has been performed by the Working Party and also by the officers. And I'm happy to announce that of that 550-page set of wodge of council papers that was sent out, there was only one mistake where the independent group was going to meet, and one grammar mistake, different to instead of different from. They've done a monumental task, but more than that, the way it is now presented is so much clearer that if you want to look up what the Chair of Baines can or can't do, you can find it very easily, very clearly explained. I do, however, think I have two quibbles. It is rather from the point of, I will find it a very useful reference book. It is rather laid out and explained as from a councillor's point of view. Councillors know what the local plan is, which is listed among important policy documents. I would have preferred it to have spelt out in that column other things like the local planning policy update and what the significance of that is. So I think it's very important to remember that our council document should be easily intelligible to the ordinary person plugging in their laptop to take advantage of the Wi-Fi on the number 173 bus into Bath. Ordinary people with ordinary concerns, like all the activists in Westfield and Radstock, cannot easily get their mind round some of the assumptions that are made in this document. But I'm quite sure it's a work in process. And I look forward to seeing the next edition, where I'm sure, well, I've got a couple of suggestions for how it can be made shorter. However, finally, I do not accept the ruling from the officer that because the Standing Advisory Council on Religious Education is an advisory body, although it is by law established in 1944 and in 1996, that it is not included. This sort of sends a message to that person on the bus that it doesn't really matter what is taught in our schools, that they are not, you know, why should they need to know that they are monitored by this committee to make sure that our religious education and related subjects conform with what Parliament requires. So I think the advisory bodies, the Soma Valley Forum, for example, which is not by law required, but nevertheless has a lot of volunteers in it who put hard work in, should be acknowledged in the next edition of the Constitution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Councillor Elliott, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There are many things I will put up with, but being lectured to by the Conservative group about free speech is not one of them that will go past without comment. There was never any intention in our previous position to restrict free speech. There was never any position which would have allowed any politician to interfere at all, and they know that. They were playing politics with it, as opposed to their own position within their own party, where the Police, Crime and Sentencing Bill introduced by them is introducing the most draconian powers that we have seen in our lifetime to restrict free speech of every person in this country, and hands massive powers to the Home Secretary and elected politicians.
Can we restrict ourselves to discussion on the Constitution?
If you're looking for real anti-democratic, anti-free speech, authoritarian policies, check your own backyards.
Councillor Hurst, please.
Yeah, it seems like silly season has kicked off a bit early, which I suspect is much more about looking forward to elections in May next year and falsely characterising stories. The reality is that what we've done here is we've listened, we've debated, and then we've adjusted and come forward with a pragmatic cross-party solution that the working party unanimously signed up to. So all the noise and the sideshow that has been stuck up here today is actually, it's all about the election in May and positioning of people. The Conservatives seem to have a short memory about getting some key decisions wrong in the previous administration. I'm not going to come down to your level and go through the list, but it's not very difficult to kind of think of a few things. But the difference is that we listen and have adjusted.
Thank you, Councillor Hurst. Are there any other councillors who wish to speak? No, I then go back to Councillor Moss to sum up, please.
Thank you very much. Well, that discussion went as well as expected, didn't it? And I think what we need to do is leave the hyperbole on one side and pick out some of the points that were made as part of the contributions. First of all, Eleanor, sorry, I can't picture someone on the 173 bus reading the Constitution, whether on the Wi-Fi or not. I'm sure it might happen, but I can't get that vision in my head. I think part of the problem we've had is the focus on the discussion about the speaking rights and whether or not you do or you don't have to write. So, 99% of the rewrite has gone through with a large amount of agreement, but clearly there are elements within the Constitution that are still arouse a bit of controversy. And Joe Wright and I have had a number of discussions about the 3 questions bit, which has got lost slightly, I think, in the discussion. For my view, and there was a discussion in the panel about it, was there needs to be the balance between the capacity of officers and cabinet to reply to questions at the same time as the ability for councillors to be able to scrutinise. And I agree that not everyone is accepting that that is right. I mean, I very much support scrutiny and questioning, but there is the issue, and there's a phrase that goes around in the vol sector about monitoring monitoring grants. It doesn't matter how many times you measure a pig or you weigh a pig, it doesn't make it a bigger pig or a happier pig. And I don't think that we have to focus on questions so that you scrutinise at the same time as not taking away the capacity and the energies of officers and councillors to actually deliver services. But I know that Joe and I would disagree on some of the elements of that. I think Paul made the point about the health and well-being strategy and whether or not that reporting is right. Sadly, the Constitution Working Group isn't going away. You'll be pleased to hear that we've now got to go and review the financial regulations and contract standing orders. Please don't feel too envious about us, but I'm sure we will pick up that element within there, and also I'm sure we'll have a report on the SACRA stuff in there as well. But I think the really important part of the discussion, I think, was thanking Michael for his clarification of the 6-month rules, that clearly there are 1 rule for councillors and there's 1 rule for officers, and for that, just confirming what we already knew. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Moss. Right, we will now go to the vote. Those in favour of accepting these recommendations? Right, thank you. Those against? Thank you. Those abstaining? No, the motion is carried. Thank you. It is 10 to 8. We are making progress. We will stop if we've not finished by 8:30, if that's okay with everyone. Okay? Yeah, carry on. Right, we now come to agenda item 13, the Treasury Management Outrun Report 21-22. Councillor Davis, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just to echo Councillor Moss and Councillor Bull's earlier words, I'm sure we send our collective best wishes to Councillor Samuel and a very speedy recovery. I'm speaking and seeing him regularly, and he'll be sad to have missed that last item in particular, I'm sure. This paper on the Treasury management outturn for 2021-22 was previously tabled and approved at last week's Cabinet meeting. At the same meeting, I presented the revenue and capital outturn for the same period, the last financial year, 21-22. As I noted last week, in what was one of the most challenging and unpredictable years of modern history, it is a huge testament to the strong financial leadership provided by our colleague Councillor Samuel, this Lib Dem administration and the Council's senior officers that paper presented a £4 million favourable result for the last financial year. £4 million which this Lib Dem administration is able to use to build further resilience for both this current and future years at this hugely challenging time, so that we can, as a council, continue to invest in services and facilities which improve the lives of all of our residents, and which we've heard from some of the previous items on this evening's agenda are now more in demand than ever before. The Treasury Management Outturn report of us tonight provides further evidence of this Lib Dem administration's strong financial leadership and the excellent position that the Council is in relation to its Treasury management, be it cash levels, investments, and its borrowing facilities. Indeed, this excellent cash flow management in the last year led to a saving of over £1 million in finance costs in the year, and our investment performance shows us regularly performing above the relevant benchmark. Especially pleasing to note is the performance of the 2 ESG investments which the Council holds in support of our commitment to tackling the climate and ecological emergencies. These are the investments held in the infrastructure income and the clean energy income funds, and which provided an average return above our budgeted rate. And so I'm proud tonight to present this paper and to move the 2 recommendations noted in section 2.1 and 2.2.
Thank you, Councillor Davies, and I'm sure the whole Council joins you in wishing Councillor Samuel better soon. Perhaps we can communicate that to him, please. Call on Councillor Dogood, second, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Having read the content, the report is reassuring in a very unsure world. With inflation now at a 40-year high, the Treasury Risk Register at the back of the report is right to identify inflation and credit and counterparty risk as the main risks going forward. The KPIs of external borrowing, credit rating of the investment portfolio, and liquidity risk all look sound based on the Prudential Indicator benchmark. I'm pleased to congratulate the officers and second the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Dogood. Councillor Moss, please.
Thank you. I wasn't going to speak, but I think it's important after hearing this moved just to point out that, and the point was made about we're above the budgeted rate in terms of income, and I welcome the report and the fact that income is higher, but it is in the economic situation that we're in. And I'm afraid the idea that there's going to be an extra £4 million to invest in services really should be couched in terms of, well, actually, part of that £4 million is picking up the inflation rises that have come to within the medium-term financial plan. And so I think it's right, as well as congratulating the officers and recognising the report, just to have that word of caution there, that this is only one side of the coin.
Thank you, Councillor Moss. Councillor Wright, please.
Thank you for the officers for this in-depth financial report. However, there are some issues that do cause me some worry. Firstly, in 3.19 and 3.12, which discusses the lender option borrower option, LOBO, loan, there is a LOBO borrowing of 10 million. The Liberal Democrat administration say that they were going to pay off this LOBO loan, but the bank increased the interest rates. So now it would appear that the council has changed its mind. This does seem rather strange, especially as some LOBOs have some dubious terms for borrowing. This clause does worry the Green Party, and we would like to know why this decision has been made and what are the terms of borrowing for this LOBO. Secondly, there are some issues with regard to the council's liquidity, otherwise known as the ability to access cash when bills need to be paid. Early on in this report, it states how the council generates £2,350,000 from investments from 10 million that is invested. It would appear that the council has a great deal of liquidity that is presently not invested. If the council did, for instance, put 25 million into investments, they could generate a healthy return for taxpayers of approximately 1 million. While 25 million might sound like a rather high figure, this report suggests that the council does appear to have 40 million in liquidity. I would suggest that these figures show the council could at least invest another 10 million and receive a further investment figure of £2,350,000. Sorry, my numbers are weird. Please can you explain why the council has decided to put so much money in the liquidity pot, especially as a liquidity risk as set out on page 510 is considered low? Thirdly, in regard to the report stating money saved, please can you explain how much this is against the spend of the council's budget in light of the inflation issues that all sections of society are presently facing? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Councillor Ball, please.
Right, speaker working. I think, Councillor Moss, we hear you very clearly, understand what you're saying. I was quite upbeat until I heard Councillor Wright speak just now, and I'm very depressed at the moment. But I'll allow Councillor Davies to answer, and I'm sure he will. But what I wanted to speak about mainly was to thank Councillor Davies for stepping in to Councillor Samuel's shoes at short notice and presenting reports to tonight, and also presenting reports to Cabinet the other day. I know Richard's watching tonight, and his hand's probably on your shoulder, Tom, so well done, mate.
Thank you, Councillor Ball. Are there any other speakers? No, I go back to Councillor Davies to sum up then, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just to address some of the points raised tonight, Councillor Wright would like to turn, I think, to Appendix 4 to see very clearly the terms of the LOBO as detailed explicitly in the report. So if she'd read the report in full, that answer would have been found for herself. With regards to the amount of money that we have invested, as opposed to liquidity, as we are ultimately a borrowing council with an ambitious capital investment programme, we are bound by rules, government guidelines about how much money we are allowed to put in longer-term investments. And that is the rules that we follow, and as presented in this report, which explains the level of liquidity and how we hold our cash, how we hold our longer-term investments, and our borrowings, and the mix of them all. Finally, to speak to the point highlighted very rightly by Councillor Moss, this next year and the year after are going to be phenomenally challenging. And we don't know when the end of this is. We know it's going to be uncertain, and we know our residents and the council are going to find this an incredibly challenging time to navigate. However, we go into it with as much resilience as we possibly could, ready to weather this storm, and that is because of the financial leadership that Councillor Samuel has provided. And with that, I'd like to move the paper.
Thank you, Councillor Davies. Right, those in favour of accepting the recommendations? Thank you. Those against? Any abstentions? Thank you. It's carried. We then move to agenda item 14, the Climate and Ecology Bill, and I would invite Councillor Crossley to move this motion, please.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, if any of you were still in doubt that climate chaos is on us now, today, not tomorrow or in a few years' time, then the extraordinary heat wave of this week must finally have convinced you. This generation will be harshly judged by history if the world we bequeath our grandchildren is unfit for human life. We know the facts and we know the consequences. We also have a good idea about the solutions, and collectively we have the means to implement those solutions. The only question is, do we have the will? The main objective in this motion is to ensure that we are eligible to be included with other organisations showing a commitment to net zero. The Good Law Project has taken the government to task over its strategy and won. The court has ordered that a strategy for meeting net zero must be published by 31st of March next year. That will give us all targets to concentrate on and deliver on. So I'm pleased to be proposing the motion in front of you, but this is tinged with sadness because we have known the consequences of trashing our world for decades now, and we have not collectively or consistently taken action. We have buried our heads in the sand and continued on our merry way. It is too easy to list problems. It is too easy to give good intentions. It is too easy to avoid taking responsibility. It is too easy to give a list of what we collectively have done in Baines over recent years. As a country, we've signed up to Paris and 1.5. Our country hosted the recent Glasgow COP26 talks. Talks are all very well, but now we must commit to targets and crucially meet or exceed them. It is pointless saying we are only a small country. Let's be a small country that leads, and locally let's be a small authority that leads. The government is still considering fracking, drilling for more oil, reopening coal pits. The answer is no, no, no. Invest in research to find clean alternatives and implement them long term. Use the power of government to enable each household to turn their homes into energy providers as well as consumers. Invest in the bus so that people can get around cheaply and easily. I could produce a long list of many things to do and not continue our addiction to carbon and methane producing substances. One government buzz phrase is levelling up. It is the government's duty to ensure that the steps we take to net zero are both fair and equitable across all sections of our society, yet at the same time address the challenge we face. And the challenge we face is immense and has been well highlighted over the last few years. Fires in Australia, America, Europe on the one hand, with heavy downpours and flash floodings and mudslides across the world on the other hand, melting ice and rising sea levels. It's a perfect storm that is feeding on itself and accelerating changes faster than previously predicted. We must act now. It is now 0 hour. The motion asks you to support the Climate and Ecology Bill going through Parliament. That will give us all targets to continue and concentrate and deliver on. So I'm pleased to be proposing the motion in front of you, but this is tinged with sadness because we have known the consequences. Sorry. Considering, I went back a page. So what is the Climate and Ecology Bill? I should have turned over, I went back. Sorry about that. I lost my thread there. It's a bill that requires the United Kingdom to achieve climate and nature targets, to give the Secretary of State a duty to implement a strategy to achieve those targets and establish a Climate and Nature Assembly to advise the Secretary of State in creating that strategy, to give duties to the Committee on Climate Change and the Joint Nature Committee regarding the strategy and targets for that connected purpose. It asks us to write to our MPs, informing them that we have passed this motion and asking them to support the bill. And it has asked us to write to 0 hour, informing them that this Council's support for the bill. Chair, I so move the motion as printed on the order papers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crossley. Councillor Warren, would you like to... I was going to say Warrington, but make up the other side this time. Councillor Warren, would you like to second?
In a week in which we've seen UK temperature records tumbling, with a large swathe of England exceeding the previous record temperature set in just 2019 by 1.6 whole degrees, these extremes are unprecedented in recorded history, according to the Met Office's chief scientist, Professor Stephen Belcher. It should be clear to all that we truly face an emergency. On the busiest day for the fire service since the Second World War, the High Court ruled that the UK's net zero strategy breaches the Climate Change Act, as it doesn't show how its legally binding carbon budget will be met. The Climate Change Committee found last month that credible plans exist for just 40% of the government's planned carbon reductions required to hit its net zero target date of 2050. And that date, of course, is much later than demanded by the Paris Agreement.
And yet just last week, several of the Conservative candidates in the race to be our new Prime Minister pledged to water down even the lip service paid by the current government to its net zero commitments. Here in Bath and North East Somerset, alongside our many activities towards our own net zero goal, we are progressing with tightening local environmental targets in many areas, including biodiversity net gain in planning and air quality, ahead of the Environment Act of 2021 becoming law. However, over and above the requirements of the Environment Act, the Climate and Ecology Bill will commit the UK to fulfilling the country's fair share of carbon emissions reductions, consistent with limiting global heating to just 1.5 degrees, bringing our national objectives in line with the Paris Agreement. It will assign new duties to the Climate Change Committee, the Joint Nature Conservation Committee, to Government and to Parliament to ensure this objective is met and to provide the support that is required by local authorities like ours to permit them to move further and faster on these objectives. Clearly, in the current context, this bill is an absolutely essential addition to the government's legal framework and must become law. As soon as possible, I have no hesitation in seconding the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Warren. We have Councillor Wright, please. And was that you putting up your hand, Councillor Hurst? No. Right. Councillor Wright, please.
It appears the best this Liberal Democrat administration can do on the climate and ecological emergency that we are all threatened with is to repeatedly come up with motions to write to the government. While this allows them to put out PR about how hard they are working to deliver a sustainable future, whilst failing to use their local powers to make significant change to aid the journey to net zero. Only recently, in the strategic evidence base for Baines, this council has made no emission cuts over and above those created by central government actions, and none since the declared climate emergency. It seems that factoring in the pandemic and empty council offices and reduced services, the council's own emissions have, in real terms, increased over the past 2 years. The great power that this council has is that it is the highway authority. The council has the capacity to make quick and systemic changes to the public highway without needing the permission of central government. For example, it could have delivered 20-mile-per-hour zones across all urban areas, allowing many public highways users to feel safer cycling. It could have delivered the North Road bus gate that would have given a strategic and safe cycling route to thousands who need access between key employment centres such as the University of Bath, schools and Wessex Water. These simple and effective measures would have enabled thousands to have safe cycling routes and make journeys that are carbon-free. It is clear that under the current leadership, the Council have purposely pursued a transport agenda that has failed to deliver the leadership needed to reduce surface carbon emissions. Over a year ago, Councillor Guy told me to dump the active travel schemes. These schemes were centrally government funded, so this leadership's decisions have in turn resulted...
Councillor Wright, just stop there. Could you stop the...
I have an email. These schemes were centrally funded, so the leadership's decisions have in turn resulted in this authority failing to receive substantial funding to pay for the necessary infrastructure needed to reduce carbon emissions. The administrations then submitted a substandard cycle resurfacing scheme through an existing path in Rainbow Woods that did not meet any of the government's cycling funding criteria. The present Livable Neighbourhoods programme has consistently failed to put in place a simple strategic route map that would give all residents a clear view of the main routes across and around the city. Instead of delivering visionary leadership with a flagship policy and a real journey to net zero, Baines has instead created piecemeal road closures with poorly delivered consultations. It seems very odd that we are being asked to support the Climate and Ecology Bill by this administration when it has consistently failed to deliver on the many of the actions that it could have taken in the past 3 years. For information, I put forward an amendment yesterday to this motion and was told by the monitoring officer that my points were not allowed.
Thank you. I would just clarify that. The monitoring officer advised you that he was going to discuss this with me as chair, because it's my final decision. I agreed with him that you were seeking to introduce into the motion a new issue or issues unrelated to the subject matter of the motion. If you'd like further clarification, I can ask Michael to increase.
Chair, I didn't need to because there's no motion before the council today, so I'll just leave it at that if that's okay with you.
No, you don't mean that. So this is the motion.
So no amendment. So we could just,
all right.
just continue to vote.
All right. Okay. I was against allowing any amendment on this motion for those reasons. Thank you. Are there any other speakers? I go back to Councillor Crossley to sum up.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for Councillor Warrington for seconding this motion.
Warren.
What did I say?
Warrington.
I apologise. Please accept my apologies. Sorry about that. Sorry.
Was that a dig at me? Was that a dig at me?
Thank you very much. Thank you for your support. And as for Councillor Wright, I think you were addressing the wrong motion. This is a motion that is talking about working in partnership with government. It wasn't a motion about what we should be doing in this council. And so your points really were for another debate as far as I was concerned. So I could have, in my own speech, put in hundreds of facts and figures, but I didn't think you wanted a list of facts and figures. The council is on a journey to reducing its carbon footprint. It is doing well in terms of what local government is doing around the country. But this is a motion about us as councillors encouraging and working with our MPs and Westminster and Parliament. And so therefore, I hope you can all support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we now move to the vote. Those in favour of this motion? Those against the motion? Those abstaining from the motion? The motion is carried. Thank you. We now move to agenda item 15. And I invite Councillor Kumar to move the motion on standing up for responsible tax conduct. Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah. It was put forward in his name, but carry on, Councillor Kumar.
Yeah, I don't mind. First of all, I'd like to thank several of my residents who asked me, suggested me to put this motion in this chamber. So this is not my motion. This is not conservative motion at all.
It is a conservative motion.
Every time you will speak, I will then interfere. Please remember that.
Sorry, let's calm down. Let's calm down. And let's not have remarks from the floor, please. Carry on, Councillor Kumar.
I take this, every time I speak, there is always, from both sides,
right,
the two of them, they interfere.
Right, forget that and carry on with your proposal.
Thank you, Madam. This is, once again, I will repeat, that this is not my motion, and this is not conservative motion. This is a motion which was asked by several of my residents to put this motion, and that's why on the PDF I did not even change the bottom line, Madam. Globalization has brought countries and communities together. World has become a village, a global village. My colleague there, Councillor Joel Hurst, maybe my previous colleague, says on social media and on Twitter that there is always two sides of the story. When I press, when I challenge, when I request, when I plead, there's no reply of the other side of the story.
Point of order. Point of order. Isn't he going far off topic? I don't think that's fair to bring another councillor into this. He's going very far off the topic.
I am talking about the other side of the story of the globalization. Exactly. And I would not hesitate in telling the council and the public the toxic side of globalization, corporate tax avoidance. Because globalization has brought the countries as a village, but there is a different side of globalization. That there is a toxic side of globalization, and that toxic side is corporate tax avoidance. That side is corporate tax avoidance. Corporate conglomerates and multinational companies can all too easily relocate their headquarters or in a county or in a city, whatever they choose. They can easily do business by showing that the jurisdiction where they are, there is the lowest taxes. According to the IMF, various government loses almost $500 billion every year. We are facing multiple problems at various levels: climate change, transport issues, money to fill our local roads, potholes, funding to support education and state schools, and so on. A government, whether at national level or at local level, cannot address these issues properly if tax avoidance is carried by the corporates to make our governments poorer. 80% of people in our country, according to a survey, believe that all business benefit from government bailouts. 77% people believe that all companies, whatever their size, should have to publicly disclose the tax that they do or do not pay in the UK. Over 60% people believe that the government and local councils should at least consider a company's ethics and how they pay their tax, as well as value for money and quality of service provided when awarding contracts to companies. Therefore, we all need to stand up for a responsible tax conduct by the companies, corporates, and conglomerates. Chair, 25 councils, I repeat, it is on the website, 25 councils till now in our country, including Oxford, Reading, Birmingham, Manchester, have passed this motion, and hopefully our council will also approve this motion. If they want to play politics, they have been playing the politics and they will play. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Quite happy to second this motion, mainly because I don't want to embarrass the rest of the Conservative group, because I have to say that I was listening to what you were saying, YK, and agreeing with most of it, but I was looking at your colleagues, I have to say, who about an hour and a half into your new membership are clearly having second thoughts. Because what you're saying is in direct contradiction and contrast to what Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss are saying in the current leadership debate. I absolutely agree that we should have responsible tax policies. It's part of a community wealth generation to make sure that we work with companies who are actually contributing to the society, to the neighbourhoods, to the community they're living in. But I have to say, the main barrier we have to ensuring that happens is the legislation put in place by consecutive Conservative governments that stop us allowing us to have a responsible tax collection policy. So, good luck and best wishes with your new home, because I'm afraid, I believe, you're going to need it. Thank you. Happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Moss. Speakers from the floor, please. And we have a Liberal Democrat amendment from Councillor Davis. and you may move the amendment. Shall we ask the substantive mover whether it will be acceptable? That's correct. Right, off you go, Councillor Davis.
Yeah, I would like to propose the amendment to the responsible tax conduct motion that is in front of us tonight, and you've got the amendment in front of you tonight. It's not that I nor my Lib Dem colleagues are opposed to the fundamental issues highlighted by the motion, nor the proposed resolutions which it calls for. For me, amongst the issues is that the proposer, as he himself has admitted, has simply taken a generic motion and submitted it for the consideration by this council. So generic is this motion that the council papers even show the Fair Tax Foundation's copyright on the footer of the motion. And in my mind, that is simply not good enough. Our residents rightly expect and demand more from us as councillors than for us to adopt generic round-robin motions. For this motion to have the impact we all wish it to have, we all as councillors should make the effort to tailor it to our local area and circumstances, and this is what my proposed amendment seeks to do tonight. Not only does the amendment highlight the specific action already taken by this Lib Dem administration, but it calls out the fact that this Conservative government, the government of the party he has just joined, has failed on countless occasions to make any meaningful progress in tackling tax avoidance, and the resulting financial loss to the public purse runs into the billions. And this is what my amendment also makes clear, as well as highlighting that all of this is in stark contrast to the Lib Dems' commitment to ensure that all businesses operating in the UK should pay their fair share of tax here in the UK. Finally, we need to tailor the proposed action as being specific steps that our area can take. And so in my amendment, we include the resolution that our two local MPs should both support and directly call for the urgent reform of UK procurement law to enable us as a local authority to reward good tax conduct through our procurement policies. And it's for these reasons that I wish to table this amendment.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder for the amendment? Right, I thought we had to have a seconder first. Okay. Councillor Greenwell, do you accept the amendment?
Of course not.
Is that
There is no point of accepting this one.
Excuse me, let's not raise our voices too much. So that is no. Right, can I have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Elliott.
Very happy to second this amendment. As Councillor Davis has said, this Lib Dem administration has been strongly proactive in reforming the procurement processes of the council, particularly with the new procurement and commissioning strategy, which prioritises climate emergency, local sourcing and innovation. But any reforms obviously have to be within the boundaries of what's allowed in national legislation. Given the obvious sympathies of the leadership of the current Conservative government, I suppose none of us should be surprised that they missed the opportunity to include these kinds of fair tax provisions when they published the new procurement regulations this year. We in the Liberal Democrats are proud to support fair taxation, not just pay lip service to it, but to actually take committed action on it. The motion as proposed is a boilerplate motion which doesn't properly acknowledge the legal restrictions faced by local councils and doesn't place the blame for the lack of action where it should be placed at the feet of our national Conservative government. Our amendment seeks to do that, and I second the amendment.
Thank you. We now move to debate the amendment. So can I have speakers on the amendment, please? Councillor Blackburn, I need the break. Councillor Evans?
Me now, Chair.
No, you wish to speak on the amendment?
Yes.
Okay. Any other speakers? No. Right. Off we go with Councillor Blackburn first.
Thank you, Chair. I just really wanted to say that the mention of silly season and politicising things is coming up again. And whilst I fully understand the need to put an amendment, I also think when you read, by contrast, the Lib Democrats are committed, I thought this was Bath and North East Somerset. That's who we're trying to pass motions about and for. And I would be, as an independent, far more comfortable supporting something that represents my residents as an independent. So I'm just concerned that the wording trumpets Lib Dems and doesn't talk about Bath and North East Somerset. And that's what we're here for.
Thank you. Can I have Councillor Evans, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and take up Councillor Davis's recommendation to be relevant to Bath and North East Somerset. And I hope that when we get to the next motion that the Liberal Democrats will remember the maximum fair tax, which I hope they'll apply in Bath and North East Somerset, which they are able to do. This, of course, they have no power over whatsoever. Richard Murphy, who created the fair tax mark, which the original amendment referred to, and so does the
Could you speak up, please?
Sorry, yes. Richard Murphy, who created the fair tax mark, said late last year that none of those managing the fair tax mark on a day-to-day basis has any qualifications in or practitioner experience of accounting or taxation. So the person who invented this lobby group doesn't have much confidence in it anymore. It may be that since then the Fair Tax Mark campaign group has managed to employ more qualified members, but we wouldn't know, and neither would the council. I'm afraid that if our council officers were to be obliged to take account of the opinions of this unelected and unaccountable group, it would be distracted from its goal of achieving good value for money for council taxpayers. It will become less transparent in the conduct of its procurement, and it would not treat businesses equally, as it should, being biased instead towards the opinions of the unqualified lobbyists with their political aims in the fair tax mark. It's always tempting to virtue signal. We've seen an avalanche of it just a few minutes ago. We are all quite clear that the ability to collect tax is an essential ingredient of a successful society. Councillor Moss seems to think that Conservatives don't believe that, but they do. So we may be tempted to agree to this motion, thinking that it can do no harm and bathe us in a virtuous light, and that seems likely what will happen. But I put it to you that it would do harm. It would potentially bias and distort the decisions which our purchasers make, and it would do so on no valid or well-evidenced basis. We're lucky in this country to be so efficient at collecting tax, so efficient that other countries come to learn from us how it's done. We have Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs engaged vigorously and expertly on this task, with the financial expertise to do such things as undertake due diligence to ensure that not-for-profit structures are not being used inappropriately. Expertise which this council does not have, and it need not seek to acquire it because it's not charged with that responsibility. I suggest we leave our purchasing officers to get on with their business to their best abilities and leave political lobby groups to make the case as is their right without risking any involvement of the council or any risk to council taxpayers' money. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me, can we address through the chair, please? And we don't want some side comments. Now, are there any other speakers on the amendment? No, I go back to Councillor Kumar to sum up. Ask the mover of the substantive motion to sum up.
It's become the substantive motion.
It hasn't become the substantive motion because we have not yet voted on it. We have to vote on the amendment. Yeah, we have to vote on the amendment, and the mover of the substantive motion has the right to sum up on the amendment.
Thank you, Chair. So here you go, Councillor Moss. It is not the Conservative group who are seeking amendments, who are politicizing it, but it is the administration, the Lib Dems group, who are laughing, criticizing, and finally tried to amend what I had already said. It is a general. I did not conceal. It was very easy for me to remove the footer or headlines, header. I deliberately did it. There's no point to make that. And in the beginning I said, it was a motion not from Councillor Kumar, it is not a motion from Conservative, it is a motion from the residents. Sadly, you are playing politics by moving, I have not seen, because this is the problem of being an independent. I know, and now I have to check the email truthfully, but email was sent about half an hour or 45 minutes ago before the council meeting was going to start, so I have not read your amendments in details. I totally agree. But I've seen 3 points over there talking about conservative policies, talking about Lib Dem policies, and this and that. Very, very vaguely and hurriedly I read. It is not about playing politics. It is a motion by the residents. And I'm sure that all of you would have received similar, exactly similar emails sent to you as well. I'm 100% sure. I'm not the only councillor to have received this motion. Every councillor in this chamber must have received. So I do not accept any amendment to this one. And if you want to amend, then I would like to withdraw the whole motion, if it is legally possible. I do not know. I raise my hand, I do not know. No, but if you want, then I would like to withdraw this one.
Right, we are unable to withdraw the motion because it's already under debate. Okay, thank you. Right, we move to the vote on the amendment. So those in favour of the amendment, please raise your hands. Thank you. Those against the motion, please raise your hands. Amendment. And those abstaining. Okay, the motion is that the amendment is therefore carried and becomes the substantive. We therefore now debating the amended substantive. Is there anyone who wishes to speak on this new substantive motion? Okay, before I ask, this is correct, before I ask Councillor Davis to sum up, the mover of the original motion does have the right to reply. Sorry, did you wish to speak? No. Okay, so do you have anything further you wish to say, Councillor Kumar?
No, thank you, Chair. I've said enough, I think.
Okay, thank you. We move now finally back to Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think we move straight to the vote.
Right, we now move straight to the vote. Those in favour of the revised... Excuse me. Those in favour of the revised substantive motion? Those against the revised substantive motion? And those abstaining? Thank you. The motion, the revised substantive motion is now passed. We will have a 10-minute recess as a comfort break. Thank you. So you're to be back by 8:45. 8:45. It's the most... Otherwise, I'll make everyone put their jackets on again. Right, we now come to agenda item 16, a motion, a cross-party motion regarding the Bristol Airport expansion. Can I have Councillor Bromley to move the motion, please?
Thank you very much.
I'm very happy to move this cross-party motion on behalf of the Liberal Democrat, Conservative and Labour groups and Councillor Wright. There's been widespread dismay locally at the decision by the Planning Inspectorate to approve Bristol Airport's expansion plans.
Yes, just a minute.
Sorry.
Point of order, yes.
Yes, I said Councillor Wright. Sorry, I said yes, I said and Councillor Wright. Sorry.
Right, can we start the clock again? Because I believe Councillor Bromley was going to restate the motion. So could you start again to include...
Of course. I have, but I did actually just include her name, in fact. I think it's just that maybe it got lost in the paper in front of the microphone.
Right. So
apologies.
Shall we start again?
Yeah, we can start again.
Right, okay.
Absolutely. Okay. I'm very happy to move this cross-party motion on behalf of the Liberal Democrat, Conservative and Labour groups and Councillor Wright. There's been widespread dismay locally at the decision by the Planning Inspectorate to approve Bristol Airport's expansion plans for an extra 2 million passengers a year on appeal. This decision flies in the face of local democracy, as North Somerset Council had refused permission after objections from all local councils and WECA, along with local MP Vera Hobhouse, amongst others. The appeal had been spearheaded by Bristol Airport Action Group, BAAN, and they've now taken the decision to the High Court. Baines Council's opposition to this expansion, in summary, are based on the impact of increased noise, pollution and congestion from flights and larger numbers of cars driving to and from the airport. The expansion plans also contradict the main aims of the climate emergency declared by Baines Council in 2019 and its commitment to be carbon neutral by 2030, which is also in line with North Somerset Council's aim. As Baines Council's objection mentions, many other UK airports have also submitted expansion plans, and currently the UK government is examining them on an individual basis rather than viewing their expansion plans in their totality, which greatly hinders the UK's chance of achieving its zero carbon aims by 2050. The Committee on Climate Change has recommended that aviation reduces emissions by 7% by 2035. Aircraft emit a noxious mixture of pollutants, including nitrogen oxides, carbon monoxide, particulate matter and soot, all of which are deposited over our villages and towns which lie beneath or near the flight path of planes as they approach and take off from Bristol Airport. The High Court statutory appeal, supported by public crowdfunding, will be held in Bristol on 8th and 9th November, which, as BAN has said, will enable residents in the surrounding area to attend the hearing and express their objections. The second main basis for the objection to Bristol Airport's expansion plans are concerned with the limited means of access for travellers. Bristol is the largest UK airport without rail or light rail links, and this leaves passengers with limited options apart from using cars or taxis. The airport flyers from Bath and Bristol are overpriced, with a return ticket on the air decker from Bath to the airport of £21 per adult and £14 for a child, meaning that families are much more likely to use their cars, thereby adding to the already congested narrow roads leading to the airport. Villages such as Chew Magna, Pensford, Chelwood and Chewstoke are already overwhelmed by airport traffic, and if the expansion is permitted, this will only get worse. 4,850 extra parking spaces are proposed in the plan for expansion. Constant headlights shining into residents' rural dwellings in villages as passengers use these unsuitable routes to access the airport are detrimental to those who've chosen to live in peace in the countryside. In daylight hours, this steady stream of traffic poses a danger to children going to and from school, often using narrow footpaths with little protection. In addition, there's now a £5 charge for dropping off passengers at the airport. Drivers are now parking inappropriately near the airport or at the roundabout to avoid paying this and other existing parking charges. The third main objection to Bristol Airport's expansion is a proposed increase of 4,000 night flights, which will be concentrated in the summer months, keeping people awake at night. Residents in Salford and other villages have already commented that there seems to have been an increase in the number of flights operating in the late evening and throughout the night. If expansion is permitted, the number of night flights will increase, causing further disturbance when the ambient noise level is low, and aircraft noise is therefore far more noticeable. Aircraft are on their final approach to the airport when they're flying over Bath and villages to the west, and this adds to the noise pollution. Bristol Airport stated their plans will lead to an increase in jobs, but it's unclear where job applicants will come from, as airports are already struggling post-pandemic to fill vacancies amongst ground staff and baggage handlers, partly due to Brexit, and there's no indication this will change in a labour market in which job vacancies are at an all-time high and applicants are looking for better working conditions and salaries and may be unwilling to accept jobs involving unsocial hours. Lack of staff has already contributed to this summer's airport chaos. Again, Bristol Airport's not very accessible for staff. To summarise, Bristol Airport's plans should be rejected as they'll hinder the UK government's stated aims to reach net zero by 2050 by adding to dangerous pollution levels and are contrary to Baines Council's climate emergency declaration and are not supported by the very poor access routes to the airport.
Right, I'm going to stop you there.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor May, please.
Thank you, Chair. On behalf of the Conservative Group, I wish to second this carefully drafted motion. And I want to thank the administration for working with all the political parties to make it a joint motion. Conservatives first moved the objection at the end of the last administration, having supported the policies of the climate emergency and also the ecological emergency. Councillor Bromley has presented a really detailed case, and I appreciate that for the motion, so I will concentrate on the impact for residents in Baines, not just North Somerset, because it does affect us as much as it does North Somerset. WECA and the City of Bristol have concentrated their approach to the airport based upon the A38 and links to the southwest. That's left the communities along the A37 as the sole route from the south of England to the airport. The volume of traffic affects Farrington Gurney, Temple Cloud, Clutton, Pensford, Whitchurch Village. Indeed, the routes then have to go through the Chew Valley to find the route to the airport. Traffic noise and pollution will increase for longer hours and as a direct result harm the ecology as well as the climate. Like many councillors, I've been knocking on doors at the moment in my community, and it's a really serious issue in people's views about the local noise coming from the airport. But it's also the fact that the roads actually are being increasing traffic over a whole range of issues. There's the big picture, but also the local impacts that draw us to welcome the chance to second this motion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor May. I have Councillor Warren and then Councillor Warrington. Councillor Warren and then Councillor Wright. Councillor Walker and then Councillor Wright. Walker first. Councillor Warren.
Okay. We heard earlier this evening that the Climate Change Committee...
Sorry, can you speak up a little bit, please?
We heard earlier this evening that the Climate Change Committee found recently that credible plans exist for just 40% of the government's planned carbon reductions required to hit its net zero target date of 2050. One of the recommendations to government of last month's progress report from the committee is that airport capacity should be considered nationally in the context of net zero, and that there should be no net expansion of UK airport capacity unless the carbon intensity of aviation is in line with or ahead of the government's pathway. They state that a demand management framework should be developed by 2023 to annually assess greenhouse gas emissions and effects from the sector. A further recommendation from the committee is that price and tax imbalances between aviation, a high emissions form of transport, and rail, which is low carbon, should be resolved in order to reduce demand for aviation, which would of course take away the business case supporting Bristol Airport's expansion. In the context of this progress report from the Climate Change Committee, and given just how damaging the expansion will be to both to local residents and the climate, it would be wrong for the High Court to permit expansion from 10 to 12 million passengers per year, and wrong of the Secretary of State to take any subsequent decision in support of expansion. I therefore have no hesitation in supporting the motion. Bristol Airport is big enough.
Thank you, Councillor Warren. Councillor Warrington.
Thank you, Chair.
W's.
I'm more than happy to support this motion and for the residents above North East Somerset, and especially my residents and Vic's residents in the Chew Valley. The issues listed in the motion and brought forward also by Councillor Bromley and Councillor May are some of those that are of grave concern to our residents. There will be incalculable damage to residents, including the light and noise pollution already alluded to, spoken about. And plus, I want to bring attention to a piece of research that I saw a couple of years ago, which has shown that young children, especially babies, toddlers, underneath flight paths have reduced development compared with those not under flight paths, and that's brain development for clarity. In addition to the loss of amenity for residents in the irresponsible parking in narrow lanes, and the filling up of some of our car parks, which for weeks on end, so that our local residents cannot park to shop, and the impact that then has on businesses with reduced numbers of shoppers. And why in this day and age is an airport able to build car parks within the Greenbelt, reducing the habitat of valuable species in a climate and nature emergency is shocking. Also, an increase in the numbers to 12 million appears to be very premature when the pre-pandemic numbers of 10 million weren't reached by the pandemic. And I was asked by my community to represent the residents at the inquiry, and I pointed out the concerns and negative impact on our residents. All of those issues have been brought to the fore today by the speakers. I'm therefore extremely disappointed, to put it mildly, by the inspector's decision, and I'd like to continue to support all avenues to demonstrate that this decision is contrary to efforts to alleviate climate change and increase biodiversity and its wholly unacceptable negative impact on our residents. This won't just impact on the local residents, it will impact on our neighbours, it will impact on all the residents under the flight path, including places like Clutton, which aren't that close to the airport, but obviously has increased traffic. But if you look at it on a larger and wider scale, this is a national issue because of the impact on the climate and nature emergency. So I'll be supporting this motion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Warrington. Councillor Walker and then Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chair. Following an independent group meeting where we discussed at length the proposed joint motion, the group's views were: whilst we support the climate emergency declaration in March 2019, in which the Council resolved to oppose the expansion of Bristol Airport, with this application now having gone through the due process of planning and a planning inspector appeal, we feel that as a council we need to take a measured approach and give this consideration before any reinstatement of opposition. We are aware this is a very complex issue with many factors and views to be considered, and it's important to consider the implications for our region's residents, businesses and tourism industry, and the wider impact of both local and national climate emergency objectives. We are not a protest group, we are an elected council, and as such we need to follow an evidence-based approach, reviewing all the information available before making an informed decision. To this end, we would recommend this be referred to the scrutiny to explore and understand fully the conclusions reached by the planning appeal process. This will enable a balanced consideration of facts and reach an informed decision with a recommendation to Council that will hopefully receive cross-party support. We do support many of the points that have been raised here this evening, but feel it requires an additional clarity at a scrutiny process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chair. Bristol Airport is big enough, and it is quite clear that the recent ruling by the High Court, which effectively stated that the government's climate strategy is illegal and inadequate, shows we are surrounded by rhetoric not matched by action. The impact that the expansion of Bristol Airport would have on aviation carbon outputs is significant, but more importantly, the expansion will blight the lives of all residents in the local area. We are calling on the government to overturn the planning inspector's decision to allow these extra millions of passengers every year if Bristol Airport is expanded. The government's own climate committee have said there should be no net expansions of the UK's airports. It is really incomprehensible that this decision has been made at the cost to local people's health and well-being, the green belt and the effect to global emissions, which is literally causing us to be on fire. Everyone is being asked to find ways to address their own carbon outputs, yet Bristol Airport appears to think that it is special and this is wrong. I repeat, Bristol Airport is big enough.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Okay, there are no more speakers, so I go back to Councillor Bromley to sum up, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to Councillor Paul May for seconding this motion. This has been a very helpful debate. It's highlighted members' concerns regarding pollution and congestion, and so thank you for all your contributions.
Thank you. We now move to the vote. All those in favour of supporting this motion? All those against? All those abstaining? Thank you. The motion is carried. We now come to the last motion of the evening, motion on council tax surcharge, and I invite Councillor Evans to move the recommendation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Finally, we have something on which your votes count and can make a real difference to people's lives. We have a policy to level a council tax surcharge on the owners of properties which are left empty for a long period. The intention is to nudge owners into bringing their properties into occupation and so improve the housing supply. Unfortunately, in making a policy to lean on existing owners, I believe we did not think through the situation when the property changes hands. The new owner is charged as if he were responsible for the years the property was empty, if he himself leaves it empty, which he has to because it has to be made habitable. So if a potential buyer who is quite well informed and savvy gets to know that the property is surcharged, then he is actually disincentivized and he will tend not to buy the property or to spend his money on it because he knows the council is going to punish him for his intention for his doing so. Even worse, which is the situation I've come across, is when the buyer is less savvy and well informed and apparently not well advised and doesn't realize that this new policy is in place. They buy a property, they find it needs work before they can move into it. Blissfully unaware, they apply to the council for the discount of council tax which they expect while they're unable to live in the property, and lo and behold they're told, no, you don't pay 50% council tax, you pay 200%. They find that instead of benefiting from a discount, they're slapped with this hefty surcharge. They're punished for sins which they did not commit. And that is where the oppression comes in. And I hope we don't, as a council, want to oppress ordinary people who are doing their best. What happened to my resident in Midsummer Norton was that they were told this, and I will quote from the letter which they received from the council. It says this: the premium charge is levied on properties that are uninhabitable and or unoccupied and unfurnished. This charge begins from the second anniversary of the property becoming empty and is charged regardless of any change in ownership. This does mean that if a long-term empty property is purchased, the new owner will become liable for the premium charge until the circumstances at the property change, that is, until it becomes inhabited. Unfortunately, there are no exemptions or discounts available. There is no avenue of appeal against this premium. I lived for a long time in Singapore, which some people regard as an authoritarian country. They never had a charge on the population which wasn't subject to appeal. They always took into account whether anybody was being unjustly or unfairly treated. and there was an avenue of appeal. So I do think that in future, when the council decides to intervene in people's lives and take money off them, that it considers always having an avenue of appeal. Meanwhile, I do hope that you will vote to end this particular injustice. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Can I call on Councillor Warrington to second the motion, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to second this motion. And one of the reasons is that one of my residents came across this issue. This was actually, from my understanding, I believe that we discussed it in PDS. I couldn't find the minutes. But I believe that we did discuss it in the PDS, and Councillor Samuel isn't here to confirm or deny this. But my understanding was that there was to be a process put in place, because my resident was dealt with in a different way to Councillor Evans's resident. So my resident did actually have, at the very least, a reduced council tax, so they didn't pay the full 200%. And again, that was a probate issue, and the property had changed ownership and was uninhabitable. And they were doing that property up, and they did that property up to bring it back into, obviously, habitation that they could live in as a family, and that property would be available when they decided to leave that property, and hopefully another family in the future. So I'm a little bit confused that this policy hasn't been introduced, because my understanding was that it had, or was certainly going to be, and that was certainly before lockdown in February 2020. So it'd be interesting to find out if this is absolutely the policy. I don't have an issue with the policy at all. I think it's a good policy. In fact, the Conservative administration brought in this policy initially, albeit at a lower level, and it was then staggered sort of up to a bigger level. I don't think there would be any issue if we were to introduce a policy, if it certainly isn't there, that when it changes hands we can reset the date, so the 2 years starts from when the property changes hands. That's not a difficult ask. It'll be in the registration, the land registration, and it's unlikely that anybody will try and manipulate that by passing on the land registration to somebody else to avoid that tax. So I don't anticipate that would be a problem, because it's likely to be an onerous transfer, and on the balance of probabilities it's unlikely to happen. So I would really appreciate if everybody could back this motion. I think it's really important to be seen to be fair to our residents, and you know, there is a cost of living crisis, and not everybody who's moving into a house, you know, they may be downsizing for various reasons. Okay, thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Warrington. Now we have an amendment tabled by Councillor Davis. Do you want to present your motion, Councillor Davis? Your amendment, rather, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and hopefully you've all had a chance to see the proposed amendment. As the Cabinet member responsible for the delivery of the first council houses in our area for a generation, I am acutely aware of the housing crisis which our area faces, and within this context of the vital importance of bringing empty properties back into occupation and use. And so I propose this amendment tonight for these key reasons. Firstly, I want to use it as an opportunity to remind us and all of our residents of the huge amount of work which this council does in supporting the return of empty properties to occupation. As the amendment notes, over 280 properties have been brought back into use via our empty residential property policy in the last 2 years. Secondly, I wanted to highlight the information and assistance, including financial assistance, available to owners of empty properties to support them in bringing the property back into use. Finally, as a council, we approved on a cross-party basis the empty policies premium nearly 2 years ago. And so now is a timely point at which its effectiveness should be reviewed, with the relevant evidence and data considered in detail. And so my amendment asks that this consideration is performed by the Corporate Scrutiny Panel, which will then report back to the Council with its findings and any suggested modifications based on the evidence and data reviewed. And it's for these reasons that I propose this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Davies. Councillor Evans, will you accept the amendment?
No.
Thank you. We now go to debate the amendment. Do you have a seconder? Oh, they just want to get home early. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Ball.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And second the amendment. I'm somewhat of a surprising motion to a full council meeting. I thought it might have been better brought through the scrutiny process, as which Councillor Davies suggested tonight. It's much better we look at policies that are put in place in detailed level. There could be other anomalies that need to be looked at as well. The move has a very valid point. I do believe trying to actually create policy at a full council meeting is not probably the best way to actually deal with this particular item. It does need looking at in detail, and we do need to come back with detailed resolution to either a cabinet meeting or a council meeting later on, and where we all can make a decision having learned all the facts. The case is very much made by Councillor Evans tonight, and I do understand what he's saying. I've had other residents come to me on similar issues. Councillor Davies is absolutely right. A lot of properties have been brought back into use by the policy, and I will say, Vic, the Conservatives did introduce a few years ago, which was enhanced under the Liberal Democrat administration, to actually crack down on a lot of people who just didn't want to bring their homes back into use and left them empty. We have to be very careful as well that we don't encourage a policy of where someone just sells a house on to land bank it. Do what Councillor Evans says tonight could lead to that quite clearly, and we must make sure we put safeguards in place. I say a full council meeting is not the right place, Councillor Evans, and I do hope you will accept that this goes to scrutiny, comes back with a full proper report, a proper evaluation report, where all members, cross-party, can have their say, and let's get it right.
Thank you, Councillor Ball. Councillor Wright, do you wish to speak on the substantive or the amendment? All right, I'll let you think about that for a moment. Councillor Moss.
Thank you very much.
Are you speaking on the amendment?
Speaking on the amendment,
right,
which the Labour Group will be supporting. It's interesting because the sentiments that put forward by Michael Evans, the idea that if you have a couple or you've got somebody who wants to buy a house in order to do it up to live in it, is something that we should all support. But the resolution is actually a charter for conveyancing solicitors and property developers. I mean, Karen, you made the point that you didn't think it would be worthwhile transferring the ownership of a house because it would be onerous. Remind you that in Bath, which has one of the lower rates of council tax because you don't have precept, if you have a top-banded house, then you're paying £3,700 per year in council tax. If there's a way that you can avoid 2 years' worth of 100% and 200%, the additional surcharge, 2 and 300, you're saving over £11,000. Of course a property developer is going to transfer the ownership of a house if you can save that kind of money. Of course you would. It makes financial sense to do that. And what the motion as it is written does is not a motion for new house buyers or house buyers who want to bring houses back into ownership. It's a motion, as I say, for Airbnb people. It's a motion for property developers. It's a motion for conveyancing solicitors. And it is not a motion for residents in Bath and North East Somerset, because in the end, that revenue will be lost to us as an authority. And if a house is empty, then we have surcharges on that for a very good reason, to encourage people to bring houses back into occupation. support the amendment, because I'm afraid, sorry Michael, 2 out of 10, you should be drafting resolutions better than this.
I think we could do without sarcasm, Councillor Moss. You're getting a little bit too over the top
sorry,
of that.
Chair, why?
Well, I think you
Which part of the Constitution, please?
I'm not going to bother and waste Council's time, but I just think you could just be a little bit more polite and courteous, as per the Councillor's Code of Conduct. Right, Councillor Blackburn.
Bizarre.
Thank you, Chair. I originally supported this when it came to us 2-3 years ago, and I really just want to note Councillor Davis's approach to this. I think it's spot on. Thank you for taking or wanting to take it back to scrutiny. We've talked about tax avoidance here tonight. I'm not sure what the debate's about. This is taking a situation, and I'm somebody who's came and took a derelict property and brought it back into life 11 years ago. It had been empty for 3 years, and I was fortunate. At that time, the policy was that I was exempt from council tax. But if I hadn't been, and I'd known the policy was 200%, and the buyer beware, you should know that through your solicitor and through your functions and the authority you're moving into, that would have been factored into the development cost of me bringing that house back into existence. More importantly, I'd have negotiated the price better, and the person keeping that property empty would see it going down in value, so would want to do something about it. So I support this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Blackburn. Councillor Wright.
Yeah. The Conservative motion doesn't make sense. If someone buys a house that's been left empty...
Sorry, are you talking on the amendment now?
Yes.
Yeah, right. Okay.
If someone buys a house that's been left empty and has accumulated 300% council tax on it, then they should offer a lower price. If they know it's going to take 2 years to do up, then they need to pay 300%, then they offer an even lower price. In this way, the market takes care of it. The Conservative motion presently would amount to the Council subsidising property developers rather than allowing market forces to work to stop owners letting property fall into disuse. Many people in this country are unable to rent a property to make a home, let alone buy a house to make a home, because so many properties are empty or have been made into luxury accommodation, HMOs or Airbnbs. The Conservative motion does nothing to address this. As Bath and surrounding North East Somerset is clearly a hotspot for property investment, it does seem rather unfair that their motion will further make those wealthy from the buying and selling of property even wealthier, while so many residents can ill afford their rent or ever dream of affording to buy a property to call home. The Council should be resolving to tackle the housing crisis by introducing compulsory purchase orders for all empty properties as soon as the law allows, e.g. as soon as they have been empty for 5 years, and bring these to completion as quickly as legislation permits. The default recipient of residential property acquired via CPOs will be the councils, with the property allocated as social housing operated by the council, i.e. council housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Are there any other speakers wishing to speak on the amendment? No. We then come back to Councillor Evans to sum up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I look at the arguments of Councillor Davis and Councillor Ball, and I want to agree with them. Let's go to scrutiny, get some sense, and come back and pass this. Do I have confidence that that is what would happen? No. Much of the Liberal Democrat amendment is irrelevant to the motion and to the whole topic. It tells us that the Council has provided a significant amount of information and assistance, that it's brought empty properties to support them bringing the property back. It's written as if this motion were to reverse the decision to have a council tax surcharge. It certainly isn't. It's to address one small but very significant injustice which occurs to a small number of purchasers. It's nice that Councillor Wright thinks that people with a dodgy property to sell would reduce its price by telling the buyer that it was subject to a council tax surcharge, but I'm afraid that unfortunately is not the real world. We should not be punishing people who who do this and who make purchases in good faith, like my constituent. And kicking this into the long grass, which is obviously what's going to happen, that's a lot better than nothing. But I would much rather that we resolve straight away to do this very simple thing, restart the clock. Nobody, including property developers, are going to pay a large council tax surcharge on property in the way that's described. They pay the 100% council tax. That should be enough if they're at the same time not profiting from the place but doing it up and making it habitable for people to come into. Nothing wrong with that. I fear that probably Councillor Moss thinks all property developers are evil, but it's not really true. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We now go to vote on this amendment. Those in favour of the amendment? Those against the amendment? Those abstaining? Therefore, the amendment is passed and becomes a substantive. Now, are there any speakers who wish to speak on the substantive? No. I then come to Councillor Davies to sum up, unless Councillor, yeah, Davies to sum up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think all I'd like to say is thank you for the supportive word from colleagues from across the chamber, and I'd like to move it to the vote, please.
Okay, so we now vote on the amended substantive motion. Those in favour? Those against? Are there any abstentions? No, the amended motion is carried. We have no councillor statements or questions, so I'm delighted to say that you do not have to put your jackets on. It's 9:25. Thank you and good night.